Hi, I'm Jules Yates.
And I'm Carly Wentzloff.
And we're here to shoot a more detailed video. Hopefully you saw the last one in which I explained the changes to the purchase agreement, but since the new version of the purchase agreement is going to be released here very shortly, we wanted to go into a little bit more in-depth discussion about those changes so you're aware of them.
So to start off, I was the member of the Forms Committee that was tasked with doing the edits and reworking some of the details. So I'll start off by saying that we reordered all the paragraphs. So if you're working with the new form, which we have a copy of it here, one of the things you're going to notice right off the bat is that it has the Aspire North logo. So if you're wondering if you're using the new one, that's the easiest way to tell. So the other thing is all the paragraphs have been reordered. So like additional conditions is no longer paragraph 24. So take some time and get to know what the new numbers are. We also went through and cleaned up some of the things like buyer and purchaser. We had both words used in the old form. We cleaned up just some of those little edits like that. So that should all be cleared up.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the primary changes. So I'll start in the same order of the last video, and that, for example, is terms. So one of the things, the original one had a 3-day loan application and conditional loan commitment. None of us on the task team could quite understand what that meant.
We also called a couple lenders.
Yes.
Yeah. What's a conditional loan commitment?
We have no idea. So we cleared that up to give the buyer 5 days to make a loan application, and for the listing agent can request proof of that application. So that was just, again, clarification. I think there was a lot of confusion on what that meant. The second topic was earnest money. Carly, you want to address that?
Yeah. So with earnest money, you see a lot of different stuff going in that blank on the current form. So what we did was we clarified, has the earnest money been collected, or will it be collected within X amount of days from the effective date? So there's no question as to whether the agent has it in hand or doesn't have it in hand. Then also there's a checkbox for if it's going to be held by the selling broker, so the buyer's agent, by their brokerage, or if it's going to be held by a different escrow agent. So we see increasingly title companies are holding it, or it's going to be released directly maybe to the seller. So there's a little bit less random stuff maybe being put in that line. So we're all staying compliant, perhaps?
Yes.
Yeah.
With the blank line, we got all kinds of things written in there. The next topic was fixtures and improvements. This was a big one as far as Carly.
Pretty exciting.
Yes.
Lots of formatting going on.
So yeah, there was a lot of confusion in the previous purchase agreement where the checkbox was after the item that was listed, and so if you were reading it quickly, sometimes there was confusion. So the way it's redrafted is it's more of a checkbox, and it's clear what items are included and what items are not. And then we added a checkbox for television mounts, just so there's no confusion on that.
The other thing that we added here was there's a line at the bottom for other. So maybe there are items in the property that I know. Kitchen islands on wheels, that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Hot tubs,
yep.
You know. Or there's also a line for excluded. You always see in a listing that there's a fixture that's excluded from the sale. Here's a good prompt for people to remember to actually write it in the contract.
Yes.
So,
yeah, and that specifically was addressed for fixtures that would normally be attached that would be excluded. There certainly would be no need to exclude something that isn't as personal property.
Yeah, I don't think any of us want to be buying fixtures for our clients.
Correct.
Because we've all been there, right?
And then the next topic was possession. There was a big dispute over what constitutes possession.
When does the clock start? When do you get it the day that you get it? So we tried our best to clarify that.
Yeah, so we added a checkbox that said possession is either at closing, no later than noon, blank days from closing, and for the purpose of possession, we defined what that date is. And for the date of closing through vacating the property, seller shall pay the sum of blank dollars per day per occupancy. That was similar to the old purchase agreement. And then the title agent shall retain from the amount of seller closing the sum of blank as a deposit against charges. Again, that is pretty much the same. We did clarify, though, by adding if possession is given prior to noon, the seller tenant shall not be charged for that day. And that was just simply to clarify, if they gave possession at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., do they actually count that as a day of possession? And just as a point on the possession, we defined the date for closing as the settlement date, because there's always been the question of, is it the date that the seller gets their money? Is it the date that you go in and sign with electronic signatures and split
people
closings,
splitting closings, people closing in California and mailing their docs in? What date does the closing actually occur? So it's the settlement date, which is it's clearly on every closing document. The other thing that we added on the possession is that the possession will be given the property in like condition.
Yeah, like condition as of the effective date.
Yeah, and it'll be in broom clean condition.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, just definitely reread that possession agreement so that you're familiar with it in case when you do get this new version. The next paragraph that we addressed was property inspection. So we had. I'm
gonna let Jules take this one.
We had lots and lots of discussion about this.
And arguments. And
arguments, yes, we did. So I think we hit about every topic relating to how this could be misinterpreted. The first thing you're going to immediately notice is 3 words are bold in this paragraph: terminate, modify, or waive. Those are going to be the 3 options when it comes to the contingency. Another big confusing point was if the buyer requests a modification, AKA sends in an addendum, does that automatically terminate the agreement? And the answer is no. There's 3 options. In short, we really didn't modify them, we just clarified them. So for example, option number 1, if the buyer is not satisfied and wishes to terminate the agreement, the buyer may provide written notice. That's clear and concise from the beginning. The second option, of course, is if the buyer is not satisfied and wishes to modify the agreement. Based on those findings, there shall have the option to submit a written request by way of addendum to the seller within the inspection period. We added, note, a request by the buyer to modify the agreement does not give the seller the right to terminate within this period. This is an option for the buyer to terminate, not the seller. The seller may reject it, but they don't have the right, simply by receiving a addendum or attempt to modify, they do not have the right to cancel. That was clarified. If modification is not agreed to in writing or the seller fails to respond, that often happens as well, the buyer must either remove the contingency during that same inspection period or it shall terminate. And then, of course, upon termination, the earnest money to be returned. So that was a clarification. And then lastly, of course, if the buyer neither removes the contingency, that it shall be deemed to be waived, and they're waiving this inspection contingency. Do you want to add anything to that?
I don't think so. It was just trying to, when that clock is ticking down, like what happens towards the end of it, it's like you either get to, say, no, I don't want to buy this house, ask for something, or if you ask for something and the seller says no, then you can choose to still move forward. So it's giving the buyer control within the window of time that they have. But at the end of that time clock, the buyer has to make a decision.
Yeah, I just want to add something too. We did have a discussion about if once the addendum was submitted, should there be additional time for the seller to respond? And just keep in mind, if you are going to get, your buyer is going to get an inspection, allow enough time for the seller to respond to that so you don't get right down to the wire. Make sure you ask for an adequate, if you think you're going to need 7 days to actually get an inspection done, ask for a 10-day inspection window. That gives you that extra 3 days to negotiate. So rather than taking it right down to the wire, we wanted to make this as clean as possible and not make it any more confusing than it already was. So hopefully that clarifies that issue.
Roland, whenever you're ready.
Okay. So we just want to clarify one point on the inspection paragraph that we didn't cover when we were going over it, because there were quite a few changes. and it sounds like there might be a little confusion. The language that we have in here is the inspection period is from the effective date until 5 p.m. blank days from the effective date. So the effective date is the date and time at which you sign. So we all know sometimes you get
delivery.
So we all know sometimes delivery might happen 5 a.m., 11 p.m. It can happen all times of day. And when you're dealing with the inspection negotiations, that clock expires, and that's when the buyer has to make these decisions. So in an effort to keep these things happening in a reasonable scope of time,
during business
hours, we said that whatever that last day of your inspection period is, at 5 p.m. that day, that is when your inspection period expires. So, for instance, if your day one, or day zero, I guess, of your contract is Monday, and that is at 5 a.m. on a Monday, you get an inked deal by delivery of your contract, and so your effective date is 5 a.m. And you have a 5-day inspection period. That would be through 5 a.m. by the old contract on Friday, right? But what we're saying with this contract is it goes through 5 p.m. on Friday because it expires on that 5th day of your contract at 5 p.m. Does that make sense, Jules?
Yes. So the long and short of it is the last day of your inspection period is 5 p.m. regardless of the effective date in this case. So it can either shorten the inspection period by a few hours if it was signed after 5 p.m., or it will actually add a few hours to the inspection period if it was signed prior to 5 p.m. So if you want to make it simple, just make sure you deliver all your purchase agreements at 5 p.m. and that won't be an issue.
Wait. So the next part that we changed, regulatory inspections. This is a brand new paragraph addressing the point of sale inspections that are required by both health departments and townships in our area, mostly referring to the septic inspections that we have.
Septic and well, yeah.
Well and septic, yeah. So if the seller is required to do these point of sale inspections, it'll give the buyer an opportunity to review that inspection.
48 hours.
Yeah, and so they don't, it's up to the buyer if they still want to go do their own personal and private inspection during their inspection period, but they would at least have a chance and an opportunity to review that once the seller has done that. So
and this is specific to where there's an ordinance or a health department ordinance that requires this. This basically separates it, for lack of a better term, from the standard inspection provision. So theoretically, your 7-day inspection period could end and have not received this point of sale requirement. This gives the buyer time after receiving it 48 hours to review it. This way you don't have to deal with addendums, extra addendums, extending the inspection period because you hadn't gotten that back yet. So we just separated it out.
Yeah, and it also commits the seller to applying for any regulatory inspections within 5 days of the effective date. So they're committing to a timeline as well. You will, sometimes see sellers waiting, and it delays the buyer's closing process because they're waiting to apply until whoever knows when. And as we've all seen, sometimes municipalities can take a while if they're the ones responsible for these point of sale inspections.
Yeah, moral of the story, if there is a point of sale requirement, order it when you list the property.
Yeah. I'm going to let you take closing because I want to talk about title.
Oh, yeah. We added some language regarding the closing, and essentially
everybody's split in closing.
Yeah, because of this, the case where you're having split closings, it just simply added, in the event of a split closing, buyer and seller shall pay their own title company's closing fee. Seller shall be responsible for county and state transfer tax. That was just a small clarification. So I'll let you address the next topic.
All right. So we added language. I don't know if you remember in your current buy-sell agreement, the title insurance is weirdly referred to, I think, in the Earnest Money paragraph.
I think it is, yeah.
Briefly, but that's it. So One thing that we addressed here is we added a new paragraph that talks about the title policy, and that the title policy, the commitment, will be provided to the buyer. The buyer will have a chance to review it to their sole satisfaction. So basically, I guess the gist of this paragraph is so that the buyer can review the title, see any exceptions to their title policy, any encumbrances on the property.
Or any surprises.
Any surprises, because we've all seen that happen. So this, to me, was really important, because if you have a cash transaction with no inspections, which we've seen a lot in these last couple of years, a review of the title policy is really important, because that commitment might reveal some things that nobody knew about. So this review of the title, I felt strongly about. It's one of the reasons I've been on this committee arguing with Jules for 2 years. So if you're nervous about this, our best advice to you is, when you're taking a listing, just order your title, your pre-title right away. Talk with your title partners to make sure that you know how fast you're going to be able to get the commitment back, and even go as far as uploading those title commitments in your associated docs on your listing, because people will have access to them right away. So if you're worried about the timeline of a buyer getting access to them to have a chance to review them, I mean, they'll have them as of the effective date if you have them in your listing.
Right.
So I feel like we're going to have some concern over this paragraph, but trust me, it's going to work out, and it's in our client's best interest, especially when we're representing buyers. And honestly, when we're representing sellers, this will take care of some of the surprises that we've all experienced in the past.
Yay,
title.
The big takeaway or the point of discussion, of course, was this is essentially another out for the buyer, and now essentially we have three outs: the inspection provision, the point of sale, and now title. Yes, it is an out, and yes, if the buyer is not satisfied, they can cancel. But as Carly mentioned, just the simple solution: order title early, have it available, provide it with the purchase agreement, and that 2-day inspection will happen during the standard inspection, or three, excuse me.
It's 3 business days.
Yeah, 3 business days. It'll happen during the standard inspection anyway, and it won't become an issue. So do yourself a favor, order those point of sales early, and order title early, and that really will eliminate any major concerns and changes in this agreement. So
prorations, we added fuel oil or propane is prorated at the seller's cost per gallon. There's always been this confusion of what price are you prorating fuel at. So that was actually some of the feedback I think we received when we reached out to everybody. Assessments. Yeah,
so on this topic, basically we clarified, so there's a lot of questions regarding a special assessment which has maybe multiple years of payments remaining, and there was confusion that the seller was responsible for the full balance, and basically I think it said relating to liens, well, that was a lien on the property. Well, we clarified in this that unless otherwise specified, sellers shall pay all installments of tax liens or local government that become due and payable on the date of closing. The buyer shall assume and pay all future installments of such assessments unless otherwise agreed to in writing. So again, if you have your title work done and you'll be aware of any special assessments, you could address that really easily here in this agreement. Next topic.
You're also going to love this, guys.
What's that?
There's now a provision in our contract for a walkthrough.
Oh, yes.
So if you've ever called for a walkthrough and the listing agent told you no, now there's a provision in the contract that gives you the right for a walkthrough.
So there was debate. There was a lot of debate on what the walkthrough gives you. What's
it for, Carly? What's it for?
Yeah. Or more importantly, what happens if something isn't correct? So the walkthrough provision just simply gives the buyer the right to walk through the property within 40 hours prior to closing to confirm all terms and conditions have been met. But it does not address what happens if they aren't things haven't been met, but at least it gives you the right to walk through.
One of the terms of the condition in the possession paragraph is that the condition of the property, that it be in broom clean condition.
True.
Unless it's otherwise agreed to within this contract.
But what if it isn't?
Well, if someone went in and torched the place and,
Well, that's under insurance, so that's a whole different topic.
Anyway, there is now a provision for a walkthrough. I mean, there are cases where people haven't seen a property in 2 months and someone moved a hoarder out, and this gives them a chance to go through and verify the condition of the property before they plop down some major coin. So it's there.
Yeah.
If a seller has an issue with one of these provisions, this contract, paragraphs can be struck through, right? So, but if you're not doing anything funky, what problem do you have with a walkthrough?
And it is an entirely new paragraph. So, just be aware of that walkthrough and make your sellers aware of it. All right. One
other thing on a walkthrough is if there were items that were, Michael's laughing at us, if there were items that were negotiated on an inspection, if you don't have a walkthrough provision, you have no way of going back and verifying that any of them were done. So when you're saying to verify that the terms of the contract were met, maybe a leaky drain had to get fixed or something, and this walkthrough lets you go back and make sure that it was done.
Yeah. All right. What's the next topic?
Effective date and timelines.
Yes. So that was
the least sexy item that we addressed.
Exactly. Note that it's effective date and time now.
Oh, yes. Time. But what time is that, Jules?
That's a great question, Carly.
Well, this is, if you watched, what's that video? Letter of the Law.
Letter of the Law, yes.
The date and time is when the agent sends it to your email.
Right.
But doesn't mean that you opened that email, because you could just act like you never opened the email. Am I getting this right?
Kind of, but you're confusing. This is why we clarified this paragraph.
So read it.
Yes. The term effective date shall mean the date and time at which both buyer and seller have fully ratified the agreement, agreeing upon its terms and delivery has been made. Keyword delivery. And in this case, delivery means hit send. I send Carly a purchase agreement. The minute I hit send, it's considered delivered, whether she opens it or not. That's verification or proof. So
because I could be golfing.
Yes. So if we have a counteroffer or an offer acceptance and I hit send and send it back to her, and the beauty of course, using .loop or some other electronic means is
even email or text.
Yes, you have.
Because we have that really long electronic
Yeah, I wouldn't accept a purchase agreement via text, generally speaking, but you could certainly say you sent it. So yes, a delivery is the important key here, is once it's delivered, that is the effective time. So it doesn't matter what time your buyer or seller signed the agreement, it matters when the effective date based on this paragraph. So, and all timelines such as the inspections are based on that date and time. So if it was 11 p.m., 24 hours is 11 p.m. the next day. That's day one. So we'll move on to the next.
We've found that counting is very hard.
Yeah, counting is
There's lots of ways to count. Yeah.
Yeah. Just while we're on that topic, from the effective date, 24 hours, that is considered one day, day one. So a lot of times people are assuming the next day is day one. No, it technically starts day two. So.
And then there's an explanation of these changes, like a quick guide cheat sheet, where I call it the Cliff Notes. If any of you cheated your way through college occasionally, I didn't.
I didn't.
No, I never used them, but we have done that, and then it's also included because you're getting an updated vacant land buy-sell agreement as well. So that you'll see that there's in parentheses we have the corresponding paragraphs for the vacant land buy-sell too. So it corresponds to both contracts.
Yes. So did we hit everything? Yes.
I believe that we made our way through the whole contract. So. We're excited. If you have any questions or concerns about it, please contact Jules. Jules.
Or actually, Megan. Megan Luce, yes.
Megan
contact
Luce
Megan.
Is always available.
The chairwoman.
Because she is our chair.
we're going to start doing some Q&A sessions here. We'll post the dates. If you want to come in and have a discussion with the whole committee.
Friendly discussion.
Friendly discussions, yes, about why we did these changes. Seriously, though, we did put a tremendous amount of time. There was a lot of discussion. This was not a simple throw a paragraph together and just run with it. We had
we collected buy-sell agreements from around the state, from different boards. We reviewed all of those. I think this has been almost a 2-year process. People keep saying 1 year. I think it's been close to 2.
It's been a long time coming, and we did really put a lot of thought into how to make this better. I'm sure we're going to get some pushback a little bit on some of these additional out clauses in the contract, but we really did make it so that if you do your homework up front, none of them really should become an issue. We all should be reading title work when we get it, and not just assuming it's okay. And I'll obviously be as professional as possible. And the committee really did put a lot of time into this, so we joke around here a little bit, but it really was a something that we did with purpose, and hopefully you guys agree that it turned out quite well.
So we'll see you soon, and thanks for listening.